So we'll just be on YouTube, we won't be on Facebook.
Here.
Bagwell.
Here.
Garza.
Here.
Carlos.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Attorney Paul Brown will be giving our prayer again this morning. Thanks, Paul.
Would you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we continue to come to you with a prayer for healing. We have many who are ill, and we pray for their safe return to good health. Lord, we pray for those families who have lost loved ones. Pray that you continue to support and guide them. Lord, we pray for the healthcare workers and the first responders, and pray for their safety. Lord, we continue to seek your face. We continue to seek wisdom as we try to meet these needs as a community and as a governing body. Lord, continue to guide us. Lord, we pray that we would all remember that we are not a disease, that we were created in your image, and that we were wonderfully made. Lord, thank you for your salvation that you provided through Jesus. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Next item, please.
Item 4, proclamations.
We do have 2 proclamations today that we won't be reading, but we'll be signing and presenting. I did want to take a moment to mention them because they're in recognition of National Public Works Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. And these are just 2 examples of bodies of people who are still essential workers out doing their jobs every day with the city. So wanted to commend our Public Works Department and, of course, all of our first responders for the work they do every day. And just mention that we'll get those signed and out to the appropriate people. Next item, please.
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
So at this time, we do have a remote presentation.
Please enter your conference access number.
Mayor, I'd like to just give a little introduction.
Yeah, please
before.
do.
This morning you will hear a presentation from Michelle Carter. She is of Michelle Carter Consulting out of Topeka. And this is on a consultant that SCKEDD has actually hired. And this is for them to write a grant application for the Federal Home Loan Bank out of Topeka. It's an owner-occupied rehab project. And the reason why I'm bringing it before the council this morning is just it's an informational purpose. As part of the work that will need to be done, there is some investment that the city would need to make in the amount of $4,500, and that would be to help offset the cost of writing this grant application. And then, like with several grant applications, if the consultant is successful, they do get a small bonus, and that would be $1,500. So we're looking at $6,000. But this would be a potential $500,000 grant, and up to 50 homes, owner-occupied homes, and helping them do some rehab, and then leveraging those funds with SCKEDD weatherization funds, pressure patch funds, those type of things. So it's an ongoing effort of us to try to continue to improve the quality and quantity of housing within the city of Hutchinson. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Carter, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan.
Michelle, did you hear that? You're on.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today we'll be discussing the 2020 Affordable Housing Program through the Federal Home Loan Bank of Topeka. And we're specifically going to talk about their owner-occupied rehab program and how it can help your community. And my name is Michelle Carter, and I own Michelle Carter Consulting. Next screen, please. Just a little bit about myself so you'll kind of know what my experience is. I was previously employed at Federal Home Loan Bank of Topeka for 25 years, and I managed the homeowner and rental departments and the housing at that time. I started Michelle Carter Consulting in 2014 because I saw a need for people in the community and in the Federal Home Loan Bank district, and people needing help with grant writing, grant management, income certifications, and compliance issues for homeowner and rental projects. And since 2014, and basically in the 5 years I've written applications since then, I've had 10 approved grant applications totaling over $5 million. I'm also the membership coordinator for the Kansas Housing Association, which is a group that basically is structured for the low-income housing tax credit community in Kansas. I also manage the Affordable Housing Program disbursement process statewide for Habitat for Humanity in Colorado. So kind of what that means is they were approved for one of the grants that I'm getting ready to talk about, and then after approval, I actually also take care of getting the disbursements to the homeowners. Next screen, please. For those of you that may not know who Federal Home Loan Bank is, I'm going to let you know a little bit about them and how they can help your community. And they're a privately owned and federally chartered, and they promote affordable housing, so they're kind of a quasi-government agency. They're regulated by the Federal Housing Finance Board, but they're actually considered a quasi-federal agency. They were established in 1932 to help during the Great Depression and to promote homeownership and relieve financial strains on the thrift institutions. They still do that today by giving different types of grants to the communities in their district. They're required to give away 10% of their net earnings every year to promote affordable housing, and the district that they serve is Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. They offer funding for both rental and homeownership projects, and some of the examples of the types of grants that they fund would be rental new construction, which could be for family or those with special needs or seniors, rental rehab, tax credit projects, owner-occupied rehab, which is what we'll be talking about today, and they also offer down payment assistance and closing cost assistance for homebuyers. Next screen, please. A little bit about the AHP program in 2020. There's going to be $13.3 million available this year, which is a little more than they had last year, which is good. The maximum you can ask for per project is $750,000, and that's been lowered. Last year it was $1 million, but they've lowered that down to $750,000 for 2020. The maximum subsidy per unit is $50,000. All applications received are scored based on commitments made in the AHP application. So basically, there's a total of 100 points possible, and the applications are received and they're scored competitively. The rental and the homeowner, they're all scored together on a competitive basis. So not all of them are funded. It just depends on which ones score the highest based on Federal Home Loan Bank scoring system. So the round opens on July 6th, so that would be the soonest that the application process can start. And their process is basically an online application that where questions have to be answered, and of course there's going to be a lot of information that I would be giving them, uploading to them, so they make sure that there's a true need in your community, and also what kind of commitments you're willing to make for the application. Then the applications have to be submitted by 5 o'clock p.m. on August 21st, so that's about 45 days from start to completion. And then the awards, the Federal Home Loan Bank scores them, and that process takes a little while. And so the awards won't be announced until on or before December 31st of 2020. Usually they announce them right after their board meeting in December, so it might be more towards, middle of December or before Christmas break. We might hear something, but the very latest is December 31st. And of course, the eligibility is and won't be available until the earliest of February of 2021, because they'll announce them towards the end of December, and then it takes a month or two for them to get the agreements sent out to the member bank and to the nonprofit sponsor, which would be SCKEDD. They have to sign that and get those turned back in before they can start asking for funds. Next. This is just kind of a list of some examples of eligible and ineligible rehab, and this is by no means an all-inclusive list. This is just kind of basically what they do. If you have any specific questions about anything that may not be shown in rules, obviously none of that will be covered. Next page. The subsidy per unit, and what that is the award per home buyer, is determined by the project sponsor, which is SCKEDD, and the member bank submitting the application, and whoever else is involved in the process, the community or however that works in your area. We pre-scored the application, and I felt the application scored high enough to submit it for consideration. with a $10,000 subsidy per unit. And so that would mean per home buyer, they would be eligible for $10,000 of repair work. Some of the things I look at on the pre-score, like I said, it's scored on a 100 point basis, and I worked with Julia to get a score for the project based on what we thought the community could commit to. What I do before I agree to do an application is I pre-score it, and if I don't think it's going to be high enough to possibly be funded, then I won't take the job. So before we even made plans to do this presentation, we pre-scored it to make sure that I thought it would at least have a chance to be funded. And it is a very competitive process, which is driven by the project score. So it depends on how many applications are submitted every round. It's scored competitively against others competing for the funds. When I scored it, I thought it had a fairly good chance of being funded. However, there's no guarantee of any application ever of approval by the grant writer. There's just no way to do that because there's,
Be expected.
it just depends on the competition at the time and different areas of how they score the criteria and those types of things. There's no longer a requirement, which is a good thing, for the borrower to sign a real estate retention agreement for this grant, and the funds are not repayable. They used to have to sign a 5-year retention agreement, and they would have to pay a portion of those back if they sold the home within 5 years, but they no longer have to do that. For anybody that may be familiar with their previous program, they've discontinued that requirement, which is actually a good thing. Next page. If the application is approved and all the agreements are signed, a formal disbursement request will be sent to Federal Home Loan Bank by SCKEDD for each individual home buyer as the rehab is completed. So you're not going to get, say for instance, that you get a $100,000 grant. You're not going to get a $100,000 check. It's going to be distributed on a home buyer by home buyer basis when the rehab is complete. So what happens is the subsidy request will be sent to Federal Home Loan Bank. Federal Home Loan Bank, once they go through the process of approving it, once it's approved, the request for that homeowner will be sent to the member bank, who's the bank applying for the funds. They will then pass the funds to SCKEDD, and then SCKEDD will disperse the funds to the contractor. SCKEDD will have 42 months to submit all of the requests and another 6 months to remedy any issues to close out the project. So if you ask, for instance, I'm just making this up out of my head, for 20 units of rehab, you're going to have basically 3.5 years to get all those complete and another 6 months just to clean up any problems that may arise with the paperwork we send Federal Home Loan Bank, which usually doesn't happen, but occasionally sometimes they'll have a compliance request that we may have to fulfill. Usually all of the compliance requests with homeowner projects, though, are done at the time of disbursement, so there's not going to be a lot of cleanup when this is over. Most of that compliance stuff is done at the time of disbursement request. And that's all I really have, but I would love to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, feels like there's something maybe I didn't go over. I just did a real basic overview, and I didn't really get down in the weeds about how to do the application or score it or anything like that. It was just a real basic overview. So if anybody has any questions, just let me know.
Yes, I have one question. This is Steve Garza, Commissioner Garza, asking the question. You up there, it says contractor. Now, can an individual do their own work, and does it have to be done by a contractor?
They prefer it be done by a contractor, and I can check with them to make sure. I do know there will be no reimbursement to the home buyer for labor. So if they choose to do it, fine. You'd have to turn in all your receipts, but they're not going to be able to ask for any kind of labor.
Just materials.
Like if obviously if a contractor does it, they will.
So basically, it'd just be materials for a person doing it themselves.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And then, you know, they have to pass inspection and things like that as well later.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Michelle, is that $13.3 million pool a state pool or a federal pool?
It's for the four states, Colorado, Kansas,
For the 4
Nebraska,
states.
and Oklahoma. Yeah.
For the district.
So I think last round, just as an FYI, I think they had around 69 applications. Last year they had less money, and their per project was $1 million rather than 750. So last year was in the 25 years I worked at Federal Home Loan Bank and the 6 years after, this is the first time we've ever seen a round like that, where not quite as many got funded as in the past. So what they've done is they've lowered that subsidy back to $750,000, and they've added more money. So hopefully they'll have some more and be able to open up a few more. I think last year they funded between 15 and 20.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well, that's still a pretty good possibility.
This may be to Michelle or to perhaps you, Ryan. In the past, we have been participating in CDBG housing grants, and I remember over time we got a grant approved with the anticipation that there would be a high level of interest from homeowners, and in that particular instance or two, there was not. And for some reason, the folks were either intimidated or it was too complex for them to apply for the grant. How would we see this play out, or what experience do we have as far as the utilization of the grant funds?
Thank you. I believe this would be our first time actually going after this grant opportunity. It's a little bit of a smaller amount of money than the CDBG. CDBG, we were looking at about $25,000 a home. So this would be, if we did what the idea, which is 500,000, 50 homes, that would be about $10,000 a home. So there is some concern about that, but Michelle has a little bit more experience with how FHLB works maybe versus CDBG, and she might be able to give a little bit more insight on that. Michelle?
Okay, I guess, could you repeat the question again about how are you going to get people in the community interested?
Yeah, how are we going to get people in the community interested in it and eligible and be open to the process and some of the bureaucracy that they have to go through, that they're not intimidated, but yet they want to take advantage of the grant funds?
I don't think it should be. Go ahead.
Michelle, I might be able to answer this question a little bit
Sure.
better.
Okay.
With my experience. This is Julia from SCKEDD. So I actually, FHLB had been in Reno County prior. It was about 5-6 years ago. It was when I was working at Interfaith Housing Services, and we did a combination of home buyer and home repair. It was one of those things that once it was marketed correctly, it took us about 6 months to get it up off the ground, but once we did, we ended up running out of funds. And when we did the grant at Interfaith, it was actually for the entire state of Kansas, not just with a focus in Reno County. And so we had to kind of prioritize to where we weren't doing strictly just Reno County, just because we had so many applications. Also, with our current weatherization program at SCKEDD, we currently have additional funding when we go in and do projects for an additional $5,000. And we've been doing roof replacements, electrical repairs, plumbing repairs, siding repairs, and some window repairs with that, but only $5,000 goes so far, and we do that in conjunction with our weatherization program. And right now, what I am seeing and what my vision was for going after this grant is the need in the community is by far very, very large at this current point in time, and we're turning people away, again, because one of our weatherization program, the additional funding that we do have, we have to spread it out amongst the 40 counties, but our highest population of individuals utilizing this currently is the Reno County area, especially with the specific in Hutchinson. A large portion of our clientele that we have served have been roof repairs. We have done electrical upgrades with knob and tube replacement. We've also done full plumbing repairs as well. So I don't think that it'll be as difficult as maybe what I experienced several years ago, just because we've already have a basis with our weatherization program and the additional funding there. The only difference is this is $10,000 versus the $5,000. And if we had a project big enough, we could layer it with our weatherization program to do a $15,000 rehab.
So Julia, this isn't restricted to a certain area of the city like our CDBG applications are?
It is not. It is actually, what we would do is probably go with the focus to the city of Hutchinson. So it would be anywhere, from north, south, east, west city limits. We have people on a daily basis when our offices were open coming into SCKEDD that would receive a letter from the city, based off of violations that they receive with pictures. And a lot of times I can tell from the pictures that $5,000 of what we have is not going to be able to repair what they're needing. They're actually needing more money than what we have to be available. So I think that just even going back from our deferrals with our weatherization program for conditions of property, we would have a very, very good target list to go after right at this moment if we were to get the grant tomorrow.
So the onus on marketing isn't necessarily with the city, it's drawing from this already existing pool of need.
That is correct. And just, a lot of my internal, like the marketing of getting together with different groups within the city of Hutchinson, being able to make those connections and stuff. I have people from different organizations all the time. I work closely with Jeff at Interfaith on some of his projects because he only has so much money, and so a lot of times we will marry up our funds together to be able to do the project together as well. So I do feel strongly that I don't think it would be a problem to send $500,000 in Reno County, and I don't think it would be a problem within the timeline that is set forth to be able to do it.
You mentioned this is income-based. What are the parameters of the income-based guidelines?
So what we're doing with the grant is to be able to have a little bit higher scoring mechanism, along with seeing the type of clientele that has currently been coming in with our weatherization program. We've done a percentage amount of so much of the money will be for 10 households for this income, so much for this income, and then there's a little bit higher income that we've reserved. I think we were thinking maybe 10%, 10 or 20% for that higher income. Michelle, you'll have to correct me. I know it's not federal poverty level. What is
what they usually for Federal Home Loan Bank, if you 100%, if you do 100% of your units at or below 50% AMI, which is very low income, you'd get the full score. What a lot of people do though, their maximum is at or below 80%. Some people will kind of target at or below 50, some maybe between 50 and 60, and then some at or below 80. The targeting is scoring based. So it's hard to say exactly what the income limit's going to be. It just depends on the household. Some may fall under the 80%, at or below 80%. Some may fall into the at or below 50. And I think Julie and I talked, and she's got a little variety in there. I think most of them were very low income, if I remember right, though.
So it's average median
And
income, average
yeah,
median income
one-
and not federal poverty rate? Is that the metric? Is that what that AMI is?
Right.
Okay.
Right. What they do, though, Federal Home Loan Bank does their homeownership income limits different. They don't use HUDs unless they're higher than the mortgage revenue bond income limits. Federal Home Loan Bank uses the mortgage revenue bond income limits right now, and they're just a tad higher on homeowner projects than the HUD limits. However, if you have a large household and the HUD limits work better, if they're higher than the mortgage revenue bond income limits, they let you use those. So there's some flexibility, but the income limits will be a little more generous maybe than what you're used to seeing from HUD, if that helps.
I had a question. So it's a reimbursement, right? After the fact. So how do we get people that have low income? What does SCKEDD does SCKEDD basically pay for it up front and then they get reimbursed, or who gets the 10,000 to be able to get it done and then the reimbursement comes later is what I'm asking.
One way to do that a lot of people do with these types of projects is they will enter, which you get points for this as well, but they'll enter into an agreement with the member bank that's submitting the application. And sometimes the member bank will agree to give a bridge loan to the contractor until the $10,000 subsidy is approved by Federal Home Loan Bank. Then the $10,000 will be paid back to the bank.
Okay.
Is there a member bank
Or-
identified locally?
RCB.
Okay.
It's who SCKEDD's working
Yeah,
with.
so I've actually been speaking with RCB Bank as my primary, just because the idea of this program came between myself and Oscar Garcia. But if for some reason RCB Bank does not decide to want to do this project, then I do have a couple other local banks that I would be working with. When I did the grant prior several years ago, First National Bank was my member bank that I worked with there, and I worked with Michael Holland on it.
Okay.
So Ryan, what are the next steps if we were to choose to proceed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next steps would be that we would draw up a contract with SCKEDD and with Michelle Carter for our payment of the grant writing cost, and then we would bring that back to your probably June 2nd City Council meeting, and that would be open to the public.
And
for
I
any
do
comment.
have a contract if you got one, and then you can make, if you're not comfortable with anything in it, you can make changes, or if you have one, I'll be glad to look at yours.
Well, I think it sounds like one more excellent tool in our
Oh, I do
toolbox
too.
to address housing issues and really try to assist homeowners instead of simply just tell them what needs to be done. So I'm really excited about this,
Yeah.
Ryan and Julia and Michelle.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The nexus of this came
Good.
from the Housing Commission and conversations actually with the Aging in Place conversation that and the Aging in Place subcommittee that the Housing Commission created, and that was just one of the barriers that we noticed was, even $10,000 for a lot of people is it might as well be $1 million, and so even $10,000 worth of work can really get that home into usable shape, improve code issues, and it's a great way that the city can partner with property owners. As we look at enforcing the International Property Maintenance Code and things like that, we do get homeowners and property owners that are in a tough situation of they don't have the funds to make those improvements to bring it up to code, and so this is just another tool in our toolbox to partner with property owners to get that done and make our community look better. So
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, kudos to the Housing Commission. They do a lot of heavy lifting on these issues. So
and thank you to Julia as well. She's done a lot of great legwork. So
Yeah.
I think this could be a great opportunity. So
Yeah.
thank you.
are there further questions?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Julia and Michelle, and we look forward to hearing more about it. We'll be voting on it soon, on the contract soon.
Okay, thank you. If you have any
Thank
other
you.
questions, just feel free to reach out to us.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
Okay, next item, please.
Item 6, consent agenda.
Any comments or a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Further comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Bagwell?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Tyler Sticker-Roll.
Yes, next item, please.
Item 7A, consider resolution adopting the National Incident Management System.
You want to get Steve in here to tell us about it?
Just a little delay out there. You can go put it, you call the item. The resolution.
Good morning, Mayor, City
Good
Council
morning.
members. Before you have a resolution regarding resolution for the NIMS, National Incident Management System. It's one of the things we need for the accreditation model. It was one of our performance indicators. What we're doing is we're going through the accreditation process. We're finding that there's a lot of little things that were never done. in order to get the city to the level of expertise that we need. This memorandum was done in 2004 by the governor of the state of Kansas. It was signed. And then in 2005, it was done by Reno County, but it was never adopted by the city of Hutchinson. And so before you, I'm asking you to sign the memorandum adopting NIMS as for the National Incident Management System for the city of Hutchinson.
Just kind of explain a little bit more what that means, Steve.
What that is really is there's multiple factors in it, but what it does for agencies like us and police department and stuff like that, they used to talk in 10 codes, 10-4, 10-28, stuff like that. Now it's all plain English. So if we go on a car accident, dispatch will say respond to a car accident. So they got rid of all these 10 codes, which nobody really, unless you were in law enforcement, you knew what you were going on. So it's plain English. The second thing is when we have the floods, like the last couple of years, when we're all down at the Emergency Management Center, we have Department of Public Works, Police Department, Fire, EMS, Emergency Management, the city manager. We're all talking the same language, and there's structure to that. And so we have somebody in charge of it. We have logistics officers, we have a planning officer. We have all these different things. Finance is a big part of any natural disaster. And so it brings everybody into common training. And part of that training is every person, whether you're in City Hall, has to have like NIMS 100. It's a class, an online class you take, and like 700. Our fire department members have 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 800 classes they're required to take. My command staff has to take higher level stuff. And so they're just mandated classes that allow us to, when a tornado, a flood, something comes of a natural disaster or a big incident, we're all on the same page and we know how to handle that structure.
Okay, fantastic.
Sounds good.
Okay, further questions or a motion on this item?
Motion to approve resolution for adoption of the National Incident Management System. Presidential Directive HSPD 5 and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dayline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Bagwell?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8A, consider design services for the Zoo Nature Plan expansion.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. This item is for design services for the Nature Play expansion at the zoo. Just a little bit about the location of this expansion. So this is the old parking lot of the zoo. So along Blanchard, you can see here the River Otter exhibit that we're building. But the area we're talking about is right in here, along the pond, and then with eventual plans to continue to develop where we have the bison and the deer over in this pen here. So, since I mentioned the otter exhibit, we'll go ahead and give an update because I know that question would come up. So here's some pictures we've taken very recently. We've been taking advantage of the last several weeks of the great weather and have done a lot of work out there. We are on pace to have the exhibit open by hopefully by the end of the month. You can see here the pool is full. This is actually Zoo Director Ryan Van Zant. I'm shooting a Facebook Live video. If you don't follow the Hutchinson Zoo, you really should follow them. They do some really great stuff on Facebook. And you can see here's our otter in our otter costume in the exhibit. So here's the holding building. They're actually laying the CMU block today. So here in the next 2 or 3 days, that'll be done. Then we have just a small section of wall to finish, which will be the last thing we do when we kind of close the entire exhibit in. So again, we're on pace to be open, hopefully by the end of the month. So, all right, back to the real project. So back in 2019, we did receive a Land Water Conservation Fund grant, a National Park Service grant, and then it's administrated through Kansas Wildlife and Parks and Tourism. Those are 50-50 grants. Total project cost was $300,000. Federal share is $150,000. And then our share then is going to be split between the city and Friends of the Zoo. So Zoo Reserve will pay $75,000, and then Friends of the Zoo will fundraise for the additional $75,000. So that's how this project's being funded. This is the conceptual drawing we used for the RFP. So just for location, here is the River Otter exhibit. What we're showing is a nature-based playground in this area. The intent is that that playground will be able to see over the wall into the River Otter exhibit. So hopefully the kids can see the River Otter slide down the slide, and then they get to slide down the slide themselves. So that's what this is. This is a splash river. So think of a splash pad, but very shallow, no spray heads, really just a flowing water. It's clean, recycled water. We'll invite kids to come and play in. 2 or 3 inches deep. We'll have rocks and logs and stuff that can kind of play in the water. And then this is some turf mounds, artificial turf mounds, just for kids to roll up on, run up and down, those sorts of things. Really just kind of have fun and play on hills. This would be the next portion of this project, which is a big open air shelter with attached restroom. And then that would lead us on, like I talked about, onto kind of where the bison are. So this is what we received the grant on based on this conceptual drawing. However, this drawing is just purely conceptual. And so we needed full-blown construction documents for this project. So that's what the RFP was for, is to take these conceptuals into actual construction documents. So to get to that point, we did issue an RFP. We had 8 firms respond, which is pretty incredible. This is a relatively small project, especially for some of these firms. Had eight proposals in. Really, we had 6 really good ones. We narrowed it down to 4, and then we really struggled with 2. We ultimately came up with a recommendation of PEC, Professional Engineering Consultants out of Wichita, for a couple reasons. I've listed them there. One is just cost effectiveness. They're the second lowest cost. We budgeted $30,000, so if we go back, really almost all of them, or several of them, were under what we anticipated the cost being. So they thought they were a good value. They also offered lots of good past projects, relevant past projects. A couple in Derby that I've seen personally that are really great projects. The one in Great Bend is actually a bear exhibit they did on a really, really tight budget, and the exhibit looks great. So that one really stood out to us to prove to us that they could work on a relatively small budget and really produce a great exhibit. They've also had several kind of nature play-based playgrounds in Wichita as well. So I thought they had a lot of good experience. Another thing we really liked is they have a connection to Hutch. So even though they're based out of Wichita, all the firms were either Wichita or Kansas City. We had one from Tulsa and one from Portland, Oregon. So we had no local firms. However, Nick Stabe, who is the landscape architect project manager for this project, lives here in Hutch, was born and raised in Hutch. His kids go to school here. So he will be managing the project, and he wrote kind of a personal letter in that about his connection to Hutch and the Hutch Zoo. So it's not quite a Hutch firm, but we appreciate that. We think he'll really take a lot of pride in this project. Also, I know some of the directors in these other communities that have worked with them, so we've got some really good references from them. Another thing that really stood out with PEC is they have on staff a certified planner who specializes in funding assistance. So what his job is as projects develop, is he helps the cities or the organizations identify ways to fundraise. So we see a great partnership between that person and the Friends of the Zoo, because they do have some fundraising they'll have to do for this project. And then kind of the icing on the cake for their proposal was they provided a hand-drawn sketch. We did not ask for any sort of sketches, so they kind of went above and beyond, and we were actually really impressed with what they provided sketch-wise. It actually had some elements that I had been thinking about during this process that I hadn't mentioned to anybody. So I was really impressed with that. So this is the sketch they provided. It does just a couple things different. It provides a split in the sidewalk, which I thought was a great idea. A lot of our events at the zoo are walking tours, and so if we can split the trail and have kind of a turnaround spot was one thing I was thinking. Then they've kind of done something really creative with the seating patio area. Again, that's relatively inexpensive to do something like that, but just by throwing some different shapes and textures into it really gets a kind of a unique element. So overall, was just really impressed with PEC and thought they did a fantastic job. So it is our recommendation to proceed with PEC for this design services for amount not to exceed $25,500. As far as timing goes, we'd like to have the playground installed yet this year. That would be the first phase, and then working on that splash river through the fall and winter, and then hopefully opening next spring or something. So, and with that, I will stay for any questions.
Brian, on a construction, or Brian, Justice, excuse me. Do you anticipate that most of the construction would be done within our staff, or would you bid it out?
We'll do a little bit of both.
A little bit of both?
Yeah, so like the playground, we'll work with the playground manufacturer. We can assist with that installation. What we've done in the past is we had a supervised build, so we'll have a contractor help, and then have our staff provide some labor. The splash river is something we'll have to contract out. We don't really have the ability to do that. And then some of just the sidewalk and flat work type stuff, concrete work, we can do that in-house and save about 50% on that. So we will most likely act as the general contractor and sub out individual pieces. There'll be some utilities that have to be installed, those sorts of things. So,
What's the long-term expenditures on this addition to the zoo?
Well, the good thing about this project and why we're so excited about this is this really extends the stay at the zoo without adding staff. So there will be a little bit of maintenance cost. There'll be some water. There'll be some maintenance to the playground, those sorts of things. But typically to extend a visit at the zoo, you're talking about adding animals and adding exhibits. When you do that, then you have to add zookeepers. So now we can extend somebody's stay at the zoo for a relatively low expense. As far as what that is annually, I haven't calculated that, but a few $1,000s maybe at the most.
I would like to see the whole thing without any animals. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm not really into the zoo. I think it's a huge expenditure on taxpayer dollars. I would like to see something that doesn't cost taxpayers so much money. So I wasn't a big on the whole otter exhibit or anything like that. I think a lot of people are moving away from trapped animals. I think we could have exhibits that are learning, but I've been to the zoo. There's like some deer, and it's not, you go there for 5 minutes, you come back. I mean, I understand it's free. I mean, I would rather either see a zoo that has vouchers for low-income people and $5 entries and has more to it. But right now, it is a real big money pit, and now you're just having an extended park. So I understand that, but some of the expenses on the zoo is huge. I mean, if you discount people that go there just for the lights walkthrough, right? And just the people that go there annually based off of the expenses that the zoo costs taxpayer dollars, it's not free. People pay to do at a very high cost. Very high cost.
So going back 3 or 4 years ago, we did the strategic plan through the planning department. One of the questions we asked was about what facilities does the public value. Where would they invest their dollars? And surprisingly, the zoo was the number one on that list. Ahead of parks, ahead of trails, ahead of all those things. Typically in most communities, trails is always king. You talk about where do you want to invest as far as new facilities. Trails is always king, and then you see parks, sometimes pools are in there. But our zoo was the number one. It's really surprised a lot of people. So, so I understand what you're saying about the expense. It is an expensive operation, but the community sees a tremendous value in it. You know, we've made a lot of improvements, very minor improvements to the exhibits over the last 5 years, really since Ryan Van Zant's been the director there. And we're working towards a way to be more self-sufficient as far as we continue to expand, and can we offer an experience that's worth a $3 admission or a $5 admission.
Yeah.
We're not to that point yet. We're hoping through this expansion, maybe through our next phase of development, you know, which will be several years down the road, you know, maybe at that point then we start looking at an admission to become more self-sufficient. So.
Yeah, because the taxpayers are paying a lot per person that walks in there. So the person gets to go there for free, but it's not actually free. There's a lot of expense that goes to running it, and it's subpar compared to some other zoos. And I know it's because it is free, but it takes up a lot of money every year.
And on the funding for this actual project, so we say zoo reserve, 75,000 is city funds. It's actually not. So this zoo reserve has been funded by the Friends of the Zoo. So over the years, as they have a revenue share with the city. So a lot of the revenues they're generating comes back to the city, and that's where we put it as a zoo reserve. So for this project, there's really no cost to the city as far as tax dollars goes. This is all revenue generated through the Friends of the Zoo.
I'm just saying, like with staff.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? $756,000 a year. 8 personnel. Is it for personnel expenditures for the zoo? I mean, some people go almost $1 million that everybody's paying for the zoo, and if you kind of put that into perspective, someone's saying, okay, as a city, we're paying almost $1 million a year for not too much, because I know that there's 8 staff, and I understand we do get grants, we do get subsidized, and it's not quite that, but it's quite a lot of money for something. I would be interested to see how many people visit the zoo outside of the special events, because if you put a light show up somewhere else for free, I'm saying like people that go in, what is the dollar amount per admission based off tax dollar expenses for people that go to the zoo?
I'm not sure that I have that number. We can figure that out. We do track
visitors
visitors that come into the zoo. To have, I can prepare those numbers, but I don't have those.
And could you exclude like any kind of event that would draw a large crowd that's not really just visiting the zoo, they're just going through to see lights and stuff like during Christmas?
Yeah.
I would like that number to be extracted and to see what is the cost per admission at the moment.
Okay.
Well, Justin, I think that Ryan has done a phenomenal job of capitalizing on the assets that we do have there and making it a better experience. I respect what you're saying, Sarah, about you know, maybe it's not to the caliber of some other zoos, but you know, it really goes back to those differences in philosophy and what makes up a community. Is a community made up only of streets and water and basic services, or is it made up of facilities? Like, you know, I make the same case with the animal shelter, even though I'm a big lover of animals. People can make the same case with Fun Valley, another highly subsidized, you know, facility, or maybe even the golf course, dare I say it. So I think everyone's going to have an opinion about, you know, what could stay or what could go. But I do want to just take a moment to say I'm personally very excited about this project and to offer our youngest residents another opportunity at recreation at no cost to them, and really glad to see that Ryan is what he's done with the zoo and with his staff.
But zoos are becoming archaic. Like, a lot of people don't like the fact that some of the animals are trapped. They're fading out. They're not something that's gonna
Well, that's true, but I think the one thing that sets this aside from what we would consider a traditional zoo is these are native types of animals and exhibits. We're not putting a giraffe in Hutchinson, Kansas, or something like that.
Here?
Yes, otters are native to Kansas.
Are those the type that we have in there?
And so, you know, to me, that's a totally different concept than what would be I mean, it's not like the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs or even the Wichita Zoo. So I think this is a wonderful asset for the community. And I'm kind of like you, Sarah. When I first looked at what it cost, I went, oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
But then after our survey and study, and it came out as such a totally positive asset for the community, I kind of changed my feeling.
And it's
So-
important to note the statistical relevance of those survey results. It's not like we had 10 or 12 people. We
Oh,
actually
no.
had, I think, hundreds and hundreds, if not over 1,000 people respond to.
Out of
Yeah.
40,000, so what was the percent? 1%?
Yeah, that was,
I think it was like-
planning department did that.
Mhm.
I don't remember the numbers on those.
Hmm.
On a typical Saturday morning or afternoon, you can drive by the zoo and you can see that parking lot full of vehicles, and you can see families with children and grandparents going to our zoo. To me, I think it's one of the best values we as a city offer to the general public and the taxpayers is that zoo. And there's been a lot of debate and discussion over the years as to what the future of that zoo, and it just about folded about 15 to 20 years ago. And thanks to the Friends of the Zoo, they rallied together and revived the zoo to what it is today. And I think we can be very, very proud of that. And I think it's just it's a great zoo, and it's free to the public, and it's one of the few things we offer that is free to the public. And I sure hope we can continue to operate that zoo.
It's not free. There's an admission cost based off tax dollars that could be upwards more than based off cost. Nothing's free if it's paid by the city.
Well, that's true. Streets aren't free.
Streets aren't free, and
Any of that kind of
yeah.
stuff, so it just depends on your
but the
perspective.
admission is free, and I think that's a tremendous service we can offer to the public.
Further questions for Justin or a motion on this item?
I would move to approve the contract for design services with professional engineering services for the Hutchinson Zoo Nature Play expansion for an amount not to exceed $25,500 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Daveline,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Bagwell,
No.
Garza,
On this issue here, I agree with Sarah on some aspects of it, but the thing, what I say, the Friends of the Zoo rally up to help pay for the zoo. And that's a good idea. And that's the reason why I would vote yes, because we have people helping to keep it in our community.
Jairo De Carvalho.
Yes, next item, please.
Item 8B, consider bid results for remodel of the law enforcement center.
All right. Never thought we'd
We
be at
did.
this day with this project.
Were you ready for me?
I am,
Okay.
yes. Very, very excited to hear about this.
Well, Mayor, Council, as you guys know, I'm here to talk about the LEC. This project started way back in 2017. But before I really get started, I kind of wanted to give a big thank you out to Captain Josh Radloff, who's my project manager on it, and then Sarah Sipe from Landmark Architect. They put a lot of hours into this project to really get us to where we are. The LEC is about a 50-year-old building, and there's been very little improvements to the building since in the 1970s. And so in 2017, the project of remodel the LEC was brought before the City Council. A plan was hatched that the Sheriff's Department would move over to the courthouse building, thus allowing expansion of the law enforcement center for HPD. And then we started looking at a remodel project at that time. The original cost estimates for the project were about $2.34 million back in 2017 is what they thought it might cost. Here we are 3 years later. There were several delays in the project. One of those delays was waiting till I came on board because we've changed some things based on my approach to the department. And then we had significant delays with the electrical, basically because we're tying new electrical and new HVAC into an old system that's still going to be in existence with the county. So there was a lot of things that we kind of had to overcome there. But we went out to bid, and we were pleasantly surprised. As you can see, I think the financial situation and what's going on in the world today is actually, by all our experts and by our architects, has really helped us with this project. We're anticipating maybe it coming back in at 2.8 million or or maybe even up to $3 million. We had some really competitive bids. There were 7 contractors in total that bid on the project. Some of them out of Wichita, and they were contractors that would not normally bid on a project this small in Hutchinson. So I think that really created some a really competitive bidding process. Weens and Company came in with our lowest bid at $1,559,000. You'll see in the memo that I sent you there that there's some additional parts of the project that are outside of that regular general construction bid, and we've got bids and quotes from those other various companies. CBS Manhattan is the company that we utilize. The city already has a contract with for our locks and stuff that we utilize for citywide for our electronic locking system. Robert's Touchline we've been working with since the beginning of the project. Obviously they're here locally, and our FF&E, and then CTA out of Wichita is who the county already has a contract with and uses for all the wiring for IT and things throughout the county building, and so we need to utilize that company to tie in with that. And then the artwork is required by our city ordinance. We'll work with the Art Council on that, and then we put in a 10% contingency, which we think is probably going to be good enough for this project. So all in total, if we accept the Weens and Company bid, the project is estimated to cost $2,204,400, which is a little over $135,000 under the original estimate that came in, from 3 years ago. So that's a pleasant surprise for us, and I think it's a very competitive bid. So,
Chief, just a question. There are so many unknowns about once we get into this project. I'm just raising the question as to whether or not the 10% or the $200,000 for contingency is sufficient, or whether or not we would be advisable to increase that just to make sure that we don't have any change orders coming back. I don't know. None of us know.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid concern. And
yeah.
I know that when we talked to Sarah at Landmark,
yeah.
One of the things that I think benefits us a little bit is that they've done some previous remodeling in that portion of the building. One of the things when they did municipal court and things like that, they found cross braces and cabling in the walls that they weren't anticipating. And so I think we worked really closely with the county on their old plans for the building, and we had that remodel project from before. And so I think that the contractors were advised of all of that, and I think they've taken all that into consideration. Yeah. You can see by the bid process that all the bids, with the exception of one that didn't get their modifications in, all the other contractors were really close. And so I really don't think we've missed anything in the project. So. And Landmark felt comfortable with the 10%. I suggested that, and she was comfortable with that, and I think I am too.
Yeah,
I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out. So we don't have to revisit that later on. But
yeah,
who
I mean,
knows?
I certainly, there's no harm in putting in a higher contingency and then not spending that money. If that's the direction that we want to go to kind of be on the safe side, especially since the project came in under what we had originally thought. So.
I feared that we were going to have a $3 million price tag on this project.
Yeah, I did too.
So I was shocked when I opened up these bids.
Yeah.
In a good way.
We were too. When we opened the bids, we were all sitting there at the table together, the three of us, and we opened the first one. We were pleasantly surprised, and then it was good to see that they were all really consistent, and fairly close there. So. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Councilman Dave, I might just add that when we're going to come back, they'll be coming back to you in 2 weeks with a resolution for the bonding of this project.
Yeah.
And so in between now and then, we can talk a little bit more about how we size that bond, and if we think a little more contingency, we can do that as well and provide for that. And so we'll have that conversation with bond counsel in time for next week.
Explain just kind of the procedures that say we approve this bid. And let's just say, worst case scenario, that we're $500,000 short, and we've actually issued a resolution for the bonds. What happens with all that, the gap, and how do we bridge that gap if there is a unforeseen additional cost?
More than likely, we'd come back with another resolution to amend that original resolution on the bonding amount. So we'd be able to do that.
Is that how you do it?
So not an IOU to Weens?
Yeah, we wouldn't, we wouldn't be able to, unless we had cash reserves available for something like that. More than likely, we would come back and amend the original bond issue for the additional amount. And I'm trying to think of an example where we've had that.
Have we
before,
typically
but,
done that?
It could be done, yeah.
It could
And
be.
it may be a conversation with bond counsel that are, the initial resolution that authorizes an amount. It's kind of like on IRBs, a lot of times there's up to 6 million or whatever that number would be, even though we know we're going to be much lower than that. And that may be something we want to do on the resolution that comes to you in a couple of weeks. And I'll visit with Angela a little bit more about that in preparation for that.
Okay, good.
Good question.
Okay.
Chief, in this, will be all Hutch PD in this building, is that correct? Or are you still gonna be sharing a little bit with the sheriff or what?
We're still sharing a little bit of the LEC space with the county, with the sheriff's office. They have their offender registration in there, their drug enforcement unit is downstairs. They still utilize the garage that we use to transport prisoners over and up to municipal court. Some of the old jail has been converted to our evidence storage, but some of it's still holding cells for individuals waiting to go to court. So there's still some shared space in that facility. But if you recall, it's probably maybe 2.5 months ago, we brought a new MOU between the city and the county in reference to that shared space that for utilities and all type of things like that, it splits costs based on the square footage and percentage of occupancy. So.
And the sheriff's mostly in the county, right?
Yeah, the sheriff, their primary administrative offices and patrol and investigations have all moved to the basement of the courthouse. So they're generally they moved out earlier in the year, so.
Okay.
So if there are cost overruns here, is there a way that we can incorporate into a resolution that any cost overruns, we would just channel those over to Reno County to pay for those differences?
You're the eternal
I'm sure they'd
optimist.
be amenable to that, John. Sure.
Yeah.
No answer to that question.
Yeah.
But there is an answer to that question.
Yeah.
I get it.
Just for what would you think, what would you think a new building would cost? 6 million?
It'd at least be double what we're putting in here. There'd be several challenges to a new building. Obviously it would be nice to have a new building, but there would be some drawbacks to that too, because we have close proximity to municipal court. We are going to walk right down the hallway to them, and so that saves transportation and those costs. Probably the biggest challenge for a new building would be IT, because right now there's an entire IT infrastructure tied in with the county. We connect to their servers, those type of things, because our requirements for security behind our firewalls are much different than city government and things like that. And so we would have to then tie into city's IT with those firewalls, put in a new IT system on site, and that would be extremely costly. That'd probably be over $1 million just itself. And I don't want to speak for Todd and his staff, but that would be a significant cost.
Chief, I don't want to get into the weeds on this project, other than I'm into it, but I'm going to ask this question. I'm just curious in terms of visiting with the architects and the like, of what can we anticipate in terms of exterior improvements to the building itself and the ingress and egress, and will that all be addressed in it, or is it all primarily internal upgrades and renovations?
Yeah, that's a very good question. This project was not, there's no exterior really improvements to the building. So as you're walking up, that was not included in this project. However, one of the things that my intent from the beginning of this project was I wanted to be able to open the law enforcement center back up to walk-in traffic. Right now everybody has to come in through the courthouse and through the security there. And so we're going to, and that's as a function of state law with the sheriff's department being responsible for security of the courthouse. We're going to be separating off the law enforcement center and that courthouse, and so we'll have our own controlled access there. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was open up the lobby to the public. And so as part of the project, and that's where our art also comes in, is we're going to really make that a welcoming location for the public to come in. Right now, if you've been in there now, it's terrible. And so we're going to actually put up, my proposal is to put up a law enforcement memorial with lighting and stuff that will honor those officers that have lost their lives in service of this community. And that will be the first thing that people see when they come in, and it'll be more welcoming and inviting, and they can walk right up and actually talk to a person as opposed to stand in the lobby on a phone. And so inside, as soon as you walk into the front doors of the building, then it will be welcoming and opening to the public, but there's nothing to the exterior of the facility. Windows, yeah, we are trading out the windows, but that was more of a
That's
control
a heat-
HVAC
yeah.
savings as opposed to aesthetics. They'll basically look the same. They'll just be more high efficiency
I mean,
windows.
I know everything's driven by cost, and we're concerned about all of this, but, what we did to this building was terrific. And you look at the old original structure and so on, what we did to this, and I can envision something like that that would just freshen that whole building up, and I'm probably the last one to be advocating additional costs, but boy, I'd hate to spend all of this and have that exterior just look. It's a drab-looking building. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, and I share that sentiment. It's very efficient where we're at. I don't know. You'd have to talk to the architects on that, and we'd have to look at that. I don't know if that would be even something that cost-wise would be feasible. Would it be more feasible than to just build a new building if you're looking at something like that? I don't know the answer to that.
One of the things we did on this building, and we didn't spend a lot of money.
No.
It was just a little bit of face on the front, little paint, so that may be something we look at as a project, depending upon how this budget rolls out, is to look at that. And we're talking about a pretty sizable building.
I know.
The problem is it's got, the moldy stuff that's kind of run down the front of that. And maybe just a fresh coat of paint and some new signage on front would be something you could do relatively inexpensive, and maybe there's money available at the end. But I hear what you're saying there, and it is a little frustrating when you look at it, because it's probably not going to look a lot different unless we dress it up a little bit. So, and that may be something we can talk with the architects to just think about, get some ideas, and maybe there's money left over. So, who knows?
As one of the things we've talked about in my staff, not about the exterior, so we've talked about the exterior building, but not about improvements there, but we would like to put, new signage out front, Hutchinson Police Department Law Enforcement Center, maybe something with this light up, down the road in the future, and I don't know what that looks like
let's
yet.
bring it into the current age.
Yeah.
It's a 40-year-old, 50-year-old building that looks like a 50-year-old building. I'd hate to have us continue to have that kind of an appearance.
Isn't there something that we have to, when they do that we have to put art, like you said earlier? Isn't there something that is required by us that has to be done, right?
Yeah, that's the 1%.
It can be exempt, though.
It's the
That's the
percent for
1%.
art on
Yeah.
all public projects, 1% of the total project. And here we're talking, what,
20, 25 grand.
25,000, yeah.
And our experience with art projects is they're
Yeah.
very cheap.
No.
It's hard to believe, yeah, so.
I don't even like the 1%. Don't even talk about that. We just, soon enough, I'd be happy if we got rid of that. But I'm more concerned in making sure that you get your funding for your mental health officers next year.
That's something that you'll hear come up in budget time. That's something that I
Yes,
think
so
is.
I'm making sure that's, to me, maybe a couple years down the road we can add, but we need to make sure that you get your funding for that mental health. That's what I'm more interested in, and I'm gonna fight
they're
real
two
hard to make
different
sure that
things.
doesn't get excluded out of this budget this year.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Further questions or a motion on the bid results for the LEC remodel?
Motion to approve the contract and all related documents with the Weems & Co. in the amount of $1,559,000. Authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on this item. Please call the roll.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Bagwell?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Tyra State Carvalho?
Yes, next item, please.
Item 8C, consider amendment to contract with Burns McDonnell for Phase 2 of the ultraviolet disinfection system.
Hello.
Morning, Brian.
We're back on the UV disinfectant.
That's right.
How's that coming along? Is it
Going
trucking
pretty
along
good,
here?
yeah.
The project?
Yeah. Brian Clennon, Director of Public Works for the City of Hutchinson. So the UV disinfection system, it was originally installed in 1990, and it's at the end of its useful life. We've got electrical systems that are failing out there, and it's very difficult to get some of the parts, especially the ballasts out there that we need to operate that system. So phase one of this project was approved by City Council back in January of this year, and phase one consisted of the preliminary design and the development of the construction cost. And during that phase, we evaluated 2 different UV systems from 2 different manufacturers. One system was $8,000 more than the other system. And city staff is recommending the more expensive option, and we've got several reasons for that. One is the delivery time is 4 weeks sooner, meaning that we'll be able to begin utilizing that system 4 weeks sooner. Technical support is also located in the state of Kansas, which we think is important. If there are issues with that system, having some technical support that is relatively close to the city of Hutch. And then the contractors also work successfully with this manufacturer on several past projects and does not have any experience with the other manufacturer. And then the final point, which I failed to put into the memo, the annual operation and maintenance cost is about $1,200 a year cheaper for the system that we're recommending. So even though it's a more expensive, $8,000 more expensive up front,
You'll recoup it.
over time, yeah, we'll recoup those costs. So today we're asking that you approve phase 2 of the project, which is the construction of the UV disinfection system. And that price for that construction project is $992,327. And it's going to be an amendment to the original design build contract that we had a year ago. So if there are any questions.
Brian, I had a little bit of discomfort with one of the paragraphs in amendment number 2 on the first page at the end. I expressed this to City Manager John Deardoff that it basically is asking for kind of an open checkbook for change orders in light of the current crisis, which I can kind of understand. Maybe there would be some supply chain issues which might push delivery dates back, but I don't want to open us up to unlimited change orders. And if you can kind of go over that last paragraph and what you think that's trying to convey, because the way I'm reading it, it makes it sound like due to this outbreak, the exact cost and duration can't be predicted.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. I had similar concerns and had conversations with the contractor. Just asked him to explain a little bit more about maybe what some of our liability is with that paragraph. And the way he explained it to me is we've got minimal exposure on this project because they've laid out the schedule such that they don't plan to get on site until all the equipment's delivered. And so that could have been, and that's probably one of the biggest concerns is the schedule of the delivery. Say a circuit board is coming from China and that circuit board is delayed 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever the case may be. If they were already on site, they'd have to demobilize.
Exactly.
And they would want money for that remobilization when that equipment was on. But they don't plan to be on site until all that equipment's there. So I think that minimizes our exposure.
Do you think that that's a pretty standard clause that they include in all of these?
I think it is not standard. I think it is standard maybe now in these times. And, you know, there's also $200 a day liquidated damages on this project, and I think that's what they're trying to protect themselves against, is saying, you know, there are some schedule components that are outside of our control.
For sure.
And could be impacted. So we want to make sure that we're not going to get $200 a day if a part's not going to be delivered for 2 months.
Yeah, I am relieved to hear that they're not going to try to do this in pieces as they wait for materials, because that's, who knows at this rate. Thank you for that
And just
clarification.
the other thing that he mentioned that could maybe have a little bit of a cost impact is if they got on site, you know, all the materials were here, they got on site, and then there was a COVID outbreak amongst their staff, and they had to send everybody home. They're going to have equipment sitting there, or they'd have to take that equipment back home, and then they'd have to remobilize that equipment and come back on site. So there may be a little bit of cost.
I see.
For that. But this is not a real.
Does the city and the company share the costs on those kind of damages, or what?
Well, I think that this contractor would work well with the city of Hutchinson, and they have worked well with us as well. So the good thing is there's minimal construction equipment required for this project. So it's not going to be a substantial amount of money if that were to happen. And we don't anticipate any of this happening. It's just worst case scenario. You know, trying to think through some of those worst cases.
No, I understand that they probably added it to protect themselves, so I think that we need to just be mindful so that we can protect the city too.
Right.
Just a question for you, Brian. I've worked on the system before. Now, are they gonna build a new building? How are you gonna do your UV stuff with them putting stuff in? Is it a new building that we're gonna have to do?
No.
It's the same building that we're gonna take it out of, so are you still gonna be able to use the old LV while the new one's being put in?
Yes,
right?
we are. There are 4 channels right now in that existing building. The new system's only going to require 2 channels.
I got you.
So we'll be able to operate the system using 2 channels. We actually have a call with KDHE this afternoon about this project. We may have a period of time where that we may not be able to treat
right.
During the switchover. So we're going to have those conversations with KDHE. But for the majority of the time, 99% of the time, we'll be able to operate with our 2 channels.
I got you.
Using our existing system while they're constructing the new system in the other 2 channels.
Good. Yes.
Okay. Further questions, concerns?
I would move to approve amendment number 2 to the contract with Burns McDonnell for the ultraviolet disinfection system, phase 2, design build agreement, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Further comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Daveline,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Garza,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes, next item, please.
Item 9, report of city officials.
Before we move on to the report of city officials, I wanted to just take a minute to acknowledge the importance of this particular meeting. Many of you watching may not realize that today is City Manager John Deerdoff's last meeting, and we all know that John was counting down his retirement not in days left, but in city council meetings left. So this is the day he's been waiting for. But I also know that John wanted to ride off quietly into the sunset without any fanfare, and he's kind of getting his wish because due to the pandemic, we can't throw him the epic retirement party we had planned. I'm very disappointed about this, but we couldn't send you off with at least a few words of gratitude for the profound ways that you've changed Hutchinson for the better. Again, try not to get choked up here. Okay, John, we are so grateful that you agreed to stay on for a few more weeks. And the way you've led the city through the COVID-19 crisis so far, to me, is just really reflective of the principal way you've led this organization for the past 15 years. You didn't wait to see which way the political winds were blowing. You immediately took action to safeguard your 400-plus employees and the public. And just thinking about the decisions you made without hesitation to close city buildings and playgrounds, extend utility shutoffs beyond the governor's order, and to institute practices internally that would keep your people safe is just commendable. Not all of those were popular decisions, but you made them because they were right. And you won't be here to deal with the long-term ramifications of the pandemic, but your legacy of taking care of your people and ensuring that quality services are provided to the public will last even after you're gone. And that's largely because of your forethought and commitment to building strong reserves. We won't endure the same deep cuts to services and staff that many cities and counties will. Again, it would have been a lot easier and more popular in budget cycles to spend those reserves down, but you made the hard decisions to do what was right, even when it wasn't popular. And I mention the unpopular decisions you make because you've been able to make those, but they haven't really rubbed off on you personally. It's this unique quirk of yours that you remain so likable despite being in public service. And so, I mean, if you could pass any of that on to me, that'd be great. I was talking with my husband this weekend, and he was telling me about how you were one of the very first people he met when he moved to town. And you struck up a conversation with him at the gym, and he was just taken aback by how friendly you were to a stranger. It really helped set the tone for his welcoming to the community. And in the 7 years I've served on council, you've extended the same kindness to me. I know it hasn't always been easy. You've answered my endless questions with patience and been willing to listen to and try ideas that you didn't necessarily agree with because your dedication to service has always transcended your ego. Gosh, this is starting to sound like a eulogy, so I promise I'm gonna wrap it up. I was trying to keep this brief. But I just think that your demeanor, that friendly, humble, accessible demeanor has paid dividends to the city in so many ways. Perhaps the most striking example is when you successfully brokered the acquisition of the Wiley building for redevelopment. And when we look at that corner of First and Main, it's hard to believe that just a few short years ago, the Wiley was an uninhabitable, derelict property. Lots of people had ideas for that building over the years, but no one could reason with the owner until you got involved. And the Wiley is just a small piece of downtown Hutch's transformation that you helped shepherd during your tenure. Again, another just shining example of the legacy you're leaving. Your leadership in leveraging those public dollars to inspire private investment has left downtown unrecognizable in a good way from the state it was when you came here. So a lot of other major projects you've had a hand in that make Hutch better now than when you arrived. Beautifying the corridor, park improvements, choosing all-star department heads for your team, just too many to name, but that's really the mark of a successful public career. You're leaving Hutchinson in a better place. And again, what ties all of this together is your deep commitment to serving the people you lead and the people in our community. So I thank you for 15 years, the 15 years of your life that you shared with Hutchinson. And I'd like to present you with a plaque in appreciation of all you've done to make our community better. I'll try not to get too close.
Jack?
You want to do it over here on camera? So this plaque says, in appreciation and celebration of your 15 years of dedicated service and professional leadership to the staff, city council, and community of Hutchinson.
Very good. Thank you. Very
Can't
much.
hug you, but namaste.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. This definitely isn't what I expected in a retirement, and it's kind of a strange time. I actually had a list that Linda's been bugging me about for like 4 months, as to a list of who to invite to this reception and all this. And so I thought I might just read all the names that I was inviting to my reception, so they feel good about it, that they didn't get cut. No, but yeah, it's been crazy. 40 years, I think, golly, I used to be the young guy in the back of the room that, looking at these old guys retiring, and I said, God, that guy's old and he's retiring, and I got a long way to go, but man, it goes quick. It really did. But I think, you always, when you enjoy what you do, it always goes a lot quicker than you think. So, but I've worked here, worked Sterling, Dodge City, great cities, great elected officials I've worked with, great staff I've worked with, and certainly going to miss that.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So,
I can move on. If I'll move on to council comments.
well, I'm
and
just
then
going to
come
say
back to
that,
you, yeah.
as I go forward, my next phase of my life, it's pretty exciting, really, and just so people know, we're gonna be around.
Good.
We'll be around. Just do a little consulting work, and gonna do a lot of playtime with family, a little travel. But I'm gonna be around, probably trying to keep an eye on you guys. So if you ever need anything, but really appreciate the opportunity to have served here for the past 15 years and the 5 years that I served before that. So thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Nancy, what do you have?
I have nothing except to say good luck in retirement. Enjoy it. Take a year. Don't make any major decisions. Just sit back and enjoy.
Okay. John, what about you?
John Deardahl, just a couple of personal thoughts here, if I may. I'd start by saying selfishly, and this is selfishly, today is a day I have not looked forward to for a long, long time, in anticipation of a day I know you are excited that it has finally arrived. But time marches on. And, I followed your career when we were both younger, many, many, many years ago, when you were in Sterling, and worked on a couple of projects there, and then Dodge City, and then, of course, back to Hutch, first as assistant and then as the manager. And I would just basically say, John, you really did it the right way. In all of your experiences, as you did it the right way, and you set a standard and a model for the right way to operate a city. So obviously, congratulations are in order. I just want to thank you for your leadership, and you typically excelled in leadership qualities, and example after example after example you were the guiding light, and you should feel good about that and feel good about yourself. Your dedication, and then beyond that, just your patience. Your patience with us, your patience with the public. I've seen you in difficult situations and how well you handle yourself professionally, and that's a real credit to you. Just a couple of things that stand out to me is that I always was impressed with your management style, with your calming voice. And I think that really set the tone and the tenure for a lot of tough decisions, that your calming voice was a strong influence on all of us. And a character that maybe some people overlook sometimes is you have a great quality of being a good listener. And I think that is a quality that all of us can learn from, that we've got two of these and one of this year, that being a good listener, I think, is a great quality. So again, you should feel good about your career. You're going to be missed, and we wish you and your family the best. So.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Well, John, me and you have a different side of things, because I was a union leader. There's times that we didn't agree, but we did it graciously, I hope. And I as well will miss you. And like I said, I was your employee and you was my employer. And like I said, we had our times, but I wish you all the luck, sir. And me being a retiree, it's not easy sometimes. So I hope to see you, and good luck, and thank you for your efforts, sir.
Well, thank you, and good luck in your time on the council going forward.
I've only known you for a short amount of time, so I don't have too much
understand.
that I can
I
say.
understand. It was-
But retiring, that's always lovely, and don't get too bored.
Yeah, hope not.
Find a good hobby.
Yeah.
That's what I say to, because I have a few friends that have retired recently, and just don't get complacent. Make sure you stay active and healthy, and find a good hobby.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments.
I did have a few more comments. I wanted to remind everybody who wasn't aware that today is match day. So the Hutchinson Community Foundation is offering $100,000 in donation matches to nonprofits of your choice. If you go to ihearthutch.org, or I think it's hutchcf.org, you can donate online, and your funds will be matched. Also at 5:30 this evening, they are having an event at DCI Park. You are supposed to stay in your car, but you can drop off donation forms if you prefer to do that in person. I wanted to mention briefly that the city has been involved with the Reno County Economic Recovery Task Force, and just really wanted to commend the county for their leadership on this, and the chamber in convening a whole lot of different voices to discuss what our reopening looks like in our community. Of course, we're adhering to the governor's guidelines, but then interpreting things that will also benefit us uniquely and answering those questions. So be watching the Hutch Chamber website for updates about that. And a shout out to Hutch Regional, our healthcare system. Still find it remarkable that we have not had any deaths from COVID-19 in our community, and I think that speaks volumes about Hutch Regional and the professionals there and the care that they're giving to people who are presenting for hospitalization for this virus. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to John for any updates. I know you wanted to go over the city's reopening plan.
Yes, Madam Mayor, appreciate that. Before you, we've been working on kind of our reopening plan for the city, really as it relates, really side by side with the county and the state governor's order. And so before you, I've got a document, or three documents that Rebecca put together, basically just showing kind of what our reopening looks like. Phase one is really pretty much the same as what we have today. That started technically yesterday. The only addition there was the Hutchinson Airport will reopen as the restaurant is opened. Still, non-essential committee meetings, we're continuing to have them. The ones we do have virtually, city council meetings remain closed to the public. We're continuing to look at our alternate schedules with our departments. We've got people coming in at different shifts to kind of avoid the cluster of employees, and that's really worked pretty well. Phase two, if you look at that, basically is pretty much the same as where we're at today, but we did add 2 new facilities that would open. The zoo would be one of those. and then the clubhouse at the golf course. Now, the golf course has been open all this time, but the clubhouse has been really closed other than one person in, one person out to pay fees. Phase or meetings would be the same as phase 1. Employees, what we're doing there is the same as phase 2. And that would go into May 18th. And then for May 18th, or beginning on June 1st, is when phase 3 would start. And we've got a lot of changes there. And you can see at the top where we've got most of our facilities all would be opened. Things like playgrounds, splash pads, those kinds of things. The only 2 facilities we've got on the list that would still remain closed would be the sports arena and Memorial Hall. Committee meetings, we would begin to bring those back in-person meetings. City council meetings would then begin open up to the public again. We would observe social distancing requirements as well during that. Most of our employees would return to on-site staffing, our regular work hours, those kinds of things. We don't have a lot of people that work remotely. We have a few, but we'll be bringing them back into to City Hall. And again, this is always subject to change depending upon what the governor does and what the county does. But we think this mirrors pretty much. We can kind of overlay what the county is proposing on their phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. That I think, Jade, are they going to do that today, or are they?
I believe so.
Yeah.
One thing that the public health officer, Nick Baldetti, clarified this morning was that we haven't begun, transitioning into phase 2 yet. So that clock hasn't started. So our phase 2 wouldn't start on May 18th. And that's because of number of cases, and he's monitoring hospitalizations. Nobody's real sure what exactly those trigger points are
So that's
yet.
going to change. Yeah.
So that will change, but I think that this was worded really well on each phase, beginning no earlier, and then the dates. So we'll just have to stay tuned. It changes so quickly.
And we'll be if anybody's got any suggestions, but we'll probably start pushing this out later today on our website, so people kind of know what the city facilities, what our plans are going forward. I've got Justin here. I don't know if there's any. I mean, a lot of questions to me, and we've been on these calls, as the mayor mentioned, about organized ball field, teams and rec leagues and those kind of things. Our swimming pools, and Justin's in contact with the Hutch Rec on what that's going to look like going forward. But I think there's still a lot of questions being asked on that. But
Are the restroom buildings in the parks? The parks remain open. Are the restroom buildings closed?
I'll let Justin talk about that.
Good morning again. Justin Combs, Director of Parks. Our restroom facilities are open. We have increased our sanitizing schedule. So.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yep. And as far as kind of all the facilities go, pools, playgrounds, splash pads, KRPA, Kansas Recreation Park Association, is working very closely with the governor's office to come up with some guidelines as far as what does it look like when you open a pool, what does it look like when you open playgrounds, those sorts of things. As a group, we're all working, all the department directors across the state are working on what those look like. So we're hoping to get that official document here in the next week or so.
Okay.
So we have more clarification of kind of what does a pool look like when we can open it during phase 2. Tony Finley and I and Cara Voss from Bueller Rec are working on the pool side specifically. So we've been asked to help with those recommendations. So.
Great. And on the splash pads, those would typically be opened. Would that be after Memorial Day or the week before?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll open those with playgrounds. We're gonna treat those basically the same way as we treat a playground.
Okay.
As far as contact points, we don't have the ability to go in and sanitize a playground or a splash pad like we could the pool. We don't have the staff there all the time like the pool will. So we've got to be a little bit more cautious on opening those.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Justin.
How about the softball season? Is it going to be pushed back or what?
Right now, we're looking at a slight delay. When we get into phase 2, when we have groups of 30 within the 6 feet of social distancing, then we can have full teams in a dugout. Parents in the stands and fans in the stands, we can kind of work that. It's really the kids in the dugout. You can't keep that social distancing until you are allowed to have more than 15 or 20 for a softball, baseball team. So
It'd just be pulled back a little bit. So what you're
a little
saying.
bit, yeah. So we've canceled tournaments up through the end of May. And the one at the end of May is still, depending on what happens. But,
Okay.
as of now, we're still planning on having a delayed start
Yeah.
baseball, softball season as well as tournament season.
It's incredible how many questions I've gotten
Yeah.
on baseball and softball.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
idea how popular it was.
Yeah.
So thank you for those clarifications.
John, while you're here, any substantial changes to that personnel cost reduction plan from a couple weeks ago, or?
No,
it's
we're
pretty much in the
still
implementation stage?
Still, yeah, and happy to report we've seen, not to get into details or into the weeds as you like to call it, but as we look at some of our first couple payrolls, or first payroll on the PD side, there was pretty remarkable change there. So that's a good good trend. But so phase 3 there was the one that will come back before you, and we start to see what our May receipts look like, what our June receipts look like, and in my conversations with other cities, and we've had some conference calls, some people are kind of taking that wait and see, and they're not as reliant on sales tax as maybe some cities are, and so but I think we're prepared for that, if and when that comes. I mean, we talked with our employees a little bit about that. I've had a chance to go around and talk to a few of the groups last week, and going to do some more this week, and just kind of talking about what that furlough might look like, and not to scare people that there are ways that with the unemployment benefits that can make them whole during whatever time frame that is. I think most of our employees, they'd rather work. I mean, they'd rather be here and do it. But certainly, that's an option that's out there. So
yeah, for sure.
Can I ask you another related question on the Woody Seat Freeway project? With your departure this Friday, who will be shepherding that project through the submission on May 18th?
Yeah, we'll have Jeff Peterson and Jessica. I forgot Jessica's last name. She's our new engineer down there. And really impressed with Jessica's work on this project and her review of the grant. But, kind of going forward, Jeff and Jessica will be kind of the point sources with, WSP and getting the grant submitted. We're getting letters of recommendation or support right now. And we were on a conference call last week with them. Had a really good call. The grant submittal is pretty much ready. Few details that we've changed, and so this next week we'll be getting all the letters of supports put together and ready to roll. So, but I think it's important to, and hopefully I'll have an opportunity to brief Jeff Cantrell on kind of that project, and it'll
We'll have a chance to brief
yeah
him.
it'll be, I think the submittal date was May
18th.
May 18th.
I think so.
Yeah, and so that's an important day, and we're going to probably have it in the grant will actually be submitted probably before Jeff would even arrive, Jeff Cantrell. But then after that, I think, and that's where I would ask the council, mayor, and some of you to really kind of keep in mind our contacts with our Congress, Senator Moran and our delegation in Washington, because I've already reached out to three Marshall's office, Moran's. We've sent them. We sent it to Moran. We'll send it to the others. Our last year's grant. We're going to submit to them a copy of our grant when we submit it to DOT, so they're aware of it. It's on their radar. We've requested an in-person visit from one of them, and if we're not able to do that because of all this, we may try to do a virtual. I don't know how we'll do that, but somebody stand up on a Woody seat and we'll do a virtual call. But I think we were through the review of that. It was pointed out the importance of our delegation picking up a phone and making a call. And you may rely on you a little bit because you've had some contact.
Got some contacts with them. Yeah.
And so we got a good grant. We got a good project. I think we've got a really good chance this time, but I think it's just going to take a little bit of that political push to get us over the top. So.
Can you share with us what your current thinking is on the match, as far as changing that, increasing it?
We left it the same, and they and I think I reported that they were very confident in our number, and they showed us the numbers, and I think I shared that of the grants that were funded the previous time. A lot of them had no match. The highest was in that 20 match, 20%.
Okay.
And so they feel really good about that. The other thing they pointed out that our grant, and we're supposed to point that out to our delegation, our request is very small. $6 million, that to me isn't small,
In the
but
scheme
when you're
of
looking
things.
at some of our competition out there, it's 200 million for an interchange and those kind of things. So that's one of the things they wanted us to really point out to our delegation, to point out to DOT that this is a really small request in light of some of the ones that they're going to be looking at. So,
John, there's been a pretty coordinated effort in the Wichita area to advocate for their build project. Do you see that as competition with ours?
we signed a letter last year. And
I remember.
I know we did, and I saw that request, and I never got back to the individual. So they're asking us to, and we did it last year, and I don't remember that we even talked about it. I think I talked with WSP, and they indicated, don't worry about it. It's in a different, because it's 200
Urban.
some, but I was concerned about that. We also were part of a build grant application for Amtrak. We were a small, that 12,500, and again, we were told not to really worry about that affecting our project.
Okay.
But I don't know, I'm still up in the air on that.
Yeah. Well, I've been hesitant to sign
Yeah.
it because I don't want it to be interpreted that either or. We're in support of either or.
Yeah. I think
I want to be collaborative and I want to support. It's a good project, but I don't want it to be misinterpreted.
And this is the interchange
The
there.
North
It's-
Junction interchange. Yep.
John, it's a mess.
It's a mess. It's a huge project.
And I think I know we submitted a letter of support last year, and I don't know that probably is going to hurt us. I think, how these things go. They're going to pick a couple projects in Kansas and a couple in Iowa, and just so who knows what that looks like. But I'd take your guys' lead on whether we would want to be a party to that.
So reaching out to the congressional delegation, at what point after the submission do we need to be on top of that and coordinate with Jeff and
I think
so
really
on?
quick. We'll send the grant in on the Thursday before the Monday it's due, or whatever that day is, a couple days ahead of time. We'll upload that. And I think right after that then, because I can't remember the announcement dates, but it's a lot quicker turnaround than what they've had in the past. In fact, the application deadline came a lot quicker than what we anticipated. So, and just trying to get it on the schedule, and really getting people to, if we get a visit here, get them to walk through and actually see the project. So, but I think Jeff Peterson needs to really kind of be our point person, just making sure the grant's in, all that, but we're going to need some help from some of the electeds to, reach out.
And Jeff is aware that we might be asked to
I've talked
be
to him about
involved.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll send out an email probably today or tomorrow to some of you, just to make sure that we're crossing all our T's and dotting our I's on that, because it is important. And I reminded Senator Moran's office that he. 2 projects in consecutive years were in Ellis County, one for the city, one for the county, and he no longer lives there. So it's time to look at us here.
Share the wealth. So. Yeah. John, what are your thoughts on the executive session?
Yes, probably. Let's just say 15 minutes. It's quick.
Are we still going to be able to?
Oh no, sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a call from a concerned citizen and was wondering what we would need to do to consider any city limits on drones. So we have a citizen where a person's neighbor keeps flying a drone in their backyard, and it's basically like a upgraded peeping Tom, and so the police have been called, but there's no legal action the police can take because he's technically still on his property, even though he's recording his daughters or his wife in the yard next to him.
Oh wow, that's a good point.
And there's no laws in the city. So what would we need to do to get together? We don't want to take away people's freedoms, but on the other hand, we don't want people's privacy being taken away either.
Well, maybe the city attorney has some thoughts on this. I know that the current restrictions are only in regards to proximity to the airport, correct? But I'm sure that there's model legislation for other municipalities out there, right? If we think that's worth exploring. What do you think, Paul?
There are some, yeah.
Okay.
I just didn't know what, as a city council, if we could have that discussion some point.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you feel like that's worth exploring,
Yeah, I think,
I would.
I mean, Paul can look in to see kind of what some of the other
Yeah.
cities are. I think it's just a question about, what are you going to regulate?
How do you
'cause
police
you can
it?
fly them anywhere. I mean, is it, well, because it's over my house? The whole, and Todd's a drone expert, so maybe you want to talk about this.
Well, I only heard part of your question because I ran over here.
Yeah.
I work in a different building.
Yeah.
I'm Todd Davis, Director of Information Technologies. The city's working on a drone program, and so I have a lot of experience with the, excuse me, the topic that you're describing. Drones are a really valuable tool to use, but when people use them wrong, then we got to deal with that.
Yeah.
So the police department contacted me, and they said, okay, we've got a complaint. How do we deal with this? So I got them in contact with the appropriate people, and so they can manage it from a law enforcement standpoint. So it actually is a breaking the law, and so our HPD deals with that from that point of view. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we don't want to limit any kind of drone use
Yeah.
for business purposes, for the purposes that they're designed for. They're great for recreation, but you're not allowed to use them to survey on people.
Yeah.
But there's lots of rules. It's really complicated when you talk about aircraft, how you can do law enforcement on aircraft. So that we're dealing with that from a law enforcement standpoint. And so, thank you. So Chief is working on that right now. He has a complaint, and so we're dealing with that from the way we got to deal with it, just like we deal with cars or any other, or tall weeds or any other kind of complaint. That's what that is. So they just need to contact law enforcement.
Yeah,
Law enforcement will deal with
law
it that way.
enforcement, but he said that basically they couldn't do anything because there was no city
ordinance
on anything like that.
Well,
And
the
there's
FAA
no-
has
Like
ordinances.
there's a burden of proof aspect too. How are you supposed to?
Okay, well, we'll get with law enforcement and make sure that that's correct in our books. But there is absolutely rules on what you can and can't do. And so the thing we got to avoid is making it so people can't do what they need to be able to do.
Yeah.
Because we do like inspections of water towers.
Yeah.
It takes $5,000 to get on top of a water tower, or 10 minutes with a drone to do that inspection.
I understand that with business needs. I was just saying, I think it's worth a discussion to consider the balance between the two.
Sure.
And that way we know that, we do care about people's privacy, but then we also
absolutely
do care about, like you said, what their purpose
yeah.
is for.
And
cost
we're talking
savings.
constitutional level,
Yeah.
rules there. So
Yeah.
we're absolutely wanting to deal with that properly. And we also want to make sure that we're using them safely, but they're solving the problems that they need to solve.
Yeah.
There's rules for hobbyists, and there's rules for commercial, and there's rules for public safety,
Yeah.
public service, and we're managing all that. So we get what you're saying, and we're certainly on it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Sorry.
Jeff Hooper, Chief of Police. I thought I'd speak to that real quickly. I'm familiar with the complaint. Obviously, we're investigating that. We have been, we did get with Todd, we got with Peter out at the airport. We've been in contact with the FAA to really find out what the guidelines are for us and for cities. The FAA does have rules, and they do have laws in reference to both commercial and private flying of drones. One of the issues that we're running with here locally, though, is although they are FAA rules, we don't have the authority to force federal law or FAA regulations. And so, unless we can find a state law or city ordinance violation to be able to enforce that, we're in a position where we can't. We've been up there multiple times, talking to the neighborhood,
Yeah.
trying to calm them down, all that type of
So
stuff,
if
trying to
we
get voluntary compliance.
adopted the same rules, like just mirrored that at a city level, then you could have jurisdiction? Is
Well,
that what I'm
I would think that, yeah, it would require for us to take specific enforcement action. And I think there's municipalities that have issued specific ordinances in reference to private drone and commercial drone flights. And so I think we need to look at a model, something like that, and find out what we're comfortable with here locally. And then, I have to add everything else in. What are the penalties going to be? Are we going to want to cite people? Are we going to want to fine them? Are we going to put them in jail for illegally flying their drone? And so what's
There's
the
a lot
penalty?
to talk about,
Right,
but I think
exactly.
we should start the conversation. We're getting into that digital age where
Do you feel comfortable coming back with a recommendation, working with Paul on what enforcement might look like locally?
Yeah, I certainly think we can look at some other municipalities and see what they're doing, and then kind of get the back end. And the first part of it may be on the ordinance on Paul's part, and then the penalty phase and how we can enforce that on the back end would be mine. So I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing that up, Sarah.
Mhm.
Are there further comments from the council before moving on to executive session?
Yes, I got a comment.
Sure.
This is very uncomfortable to do this, but you don't have everybody that's for this project as far as the roundabouts. The south end, they tell me all the time, it's gonna do their businesses. They don't like it. They don't like B Street being closed. I'm a representative. They tell me about it. They're not for this at all. So I don't know what we're gonna do. I know I'm not excited about it, but everybody has their opinion. So this is not over. They don't like it. They don't like their B Street being closed and so on. A lot of this stuff was done before I got on the council. So I just want to let you know, if I sat here and didn't say anything about it, I mean, I won't be doing my job. So
No, I understand that. I will say that the way our particular form of government works is that each council member has one vote. A majority of people voted
I understand that. I
in
understand that.
favor of submitting the grant application. So
Right.
if the grant application were approved, it will move forward. Everyone's going to have an opinion on everything we vote on, and we're not going to have consensus on everything, and that's okay. But the way our form of government works is that we've got
I
to
understand how
honor
former government works,
majority.
ma'am. Yes, but the thing about it is they're feeling they wasn't heard before.
Yeah.
So I'm just telling you what they tell me. In my opinion, at that too.
No, I
That's all.
totally understand what you're saying, and I commend you for standing up for your constituents and what they believe. So thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Further comments or a motion to adjourn into executive session for 15 minutes?
motion to adjourn into executive session for 15 minutes.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Bagwell?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Hyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
11
Let's take a
10.
short break, a few minutes.